So we'll start with your name and your background.
Okay, cool. Well, my name is Hayden Scott Lambert, and my background is I'm a bartender from New Zealand.
Okay.
That's the most in depth we're going to get.
All right.
It's complicated. It's complicated. Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about your bar.
Okay, so you're in a pub board at the moment. We opened up in late November 2016. For me, it was kind of like, how do you create a bar that doesn't look like a bar but acts like a bar? And that's what a pub board is. It's a one big piece of wood, as you can see. We have a very limited setup. We have a very minimalist style. I would say that hopefully, fingers crossed, after Buck and Brick, I was probably the next bar in the line of bars to really push the kind of minimalist looking concept. We have like one control panel here that we work from. And the bar's just a distillation of all the things that I ever wanted in a bar. You know, I wanted people, because that's a really important part of bartending. And then the second one is I really wanted to choose how we made drinks, and we weren't kind of beholden to anyone. And, you know, I think after working across Europe and then in the UK and different places and then coming back to Melbourne, I really wanted a bar that spoke very true to who I was as a person. It's very, very much, I am what I am, and it is what it is, you know, and I kind of don't compromise on those things.
So tell us a little bit about the drinks that you do.
Okay, so the drinks are a combination of classics, and then from there, when I first started, I think we only had 6 signatures. So we have 8 signatures or 9 signatures on the list, and a mixture of classics, which are 9 classics. And then the signatures are just really nice variations of drinks that I've always enjoyed, things like brambles, high fruit, high acidity, and then we get into some like interesting combinations and flavor profiles. And I kind of look at it, we have a very limited scope for what we do. We you know, like when I first opened the bar, I personally wanted a limited amount of prep time. So I was in and out of 30 minutes. So the bar could operate within 30 minutes because I have a family, I have all those things. And I always wanted to just be able to not walk in, but if life took me in a different direction, I was always able to come and control what was happening in the bar. You know, and in the beginning, when I first opened, that happened a lot. Like my son was sick and I was running late and all these different things. So I gave myself a kind of restriction on time. I gave myself a restriction on product availability. And so basically the bar has a very limited subset of products. We lean very heavily on Amaros, and then on top of that, we have like 5 different main products, like 1 gin, 2 different vermouths, a couple of rums, a couple of whiskeys, but nothing crazy, with a very limited amount of liqueurs. And so the way that you develop concepts and the way that you develop drinks is just by going through and tasting all these different combinations. And I would always say that the way that we do it is like we find something like that could be potentially extremely bitter, and then we pair that with something that could be potentially really fruity. So you get a really nice balance. And sometimes those flavors are overwhelming, but you know, it makes for interesting, complex drinks. And when I first opened the bar, I really just wanted drinks that everybody wanted to drink. And then within a year, people, they don't want that. They want complexity, and they want drinks that are hard to drink, that they tamed themselves, or they were the first adopters. And now they're like, hey, by the way, I love this drink that has fernet, banana, and miso with a little bit of sherry, you know? And so I think my style has kind of like slowly been adapted and moved, but it had a high citrus content at the beginning. So we carry like lime, lemon, and orange, and mostly freshly juiced. I was really trying to make sure that the world knew that I was an amazing bartender. And now post-lockdown, I don't really care. You know, I think that's an interesting one, like the ego and how you're like tied up in these things as well, you know, and the recognition that you're going for in bartending industry, which didn't exist when I first started.
So when you first opened the bar, what were the sort of things that that you had to encounter, maybe some of the problems that you had to overcome?
Well, I think one of the problems that we've overcome was being empty. That was the big one. You know, that was the biggest one. I mean, you know, as I said to you before in the beginning chat, you know, this has been very much just build it and they will come, hopefully, you know, very much Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner style thing. And so we had to overcome being empty. And then we had to overcome price point, because I think originally my concept was a little bit different. It would have been more of a kind of like, you know, a set menu where you came in and you had 3 or 4 drinks and then you left. And I had to improvise on that relatively quickly, because financially, you know, like Smith Street wasn't massive at the time. It was, you know, like, well, people that were low on funds but wanted to come out and have a drink, and so our cost of cocktails was relatively low or minimal at the time when we got in, and then it was like scalability and making people believe in you and like find confidence in your product and what you actually have to offer. And Melbourne's a really good cocktail city, but it's highly competitive. And so, like you had to get that belief and get people who really, really liked what you were doing to sell you. And, one of the hard things about being from Australasia or New Zealand, Australia, is that we have a very different way of looking at, like how we deal with people and the interaction. And, like New Zealand people especially can be very like self-deprecating. And that's a hard thing to sell. If you're self-deprecating, you're trying to build a business, but you're very hard on yourself because, like you have a standard and you want certain things to, come out of it. And I felt that I probably had to tame that a little bit, but then if you're too cocky, everyone hates you. So it's like, it's trying to find a really good balance. And so I think those are the things that we really struggled with in the beginning. Well, I personally did. Scalability of a small bar. Everyone's like, how's that ever going to work? And you're like, well, it works just fine. I think people underestimate the ability of a small bar to generate income. And
Sorry, and you spoke about the street that you're on. Do you want to talk a little bit about the street, your neighborhood?
yeah, I mean the neighborhood's cool as shit. Like when I first got here in 2016, it was way more like alternative, and I think lockdown had a different effect on the street because obviously people could no longer afford to live in the area and then moved out, and then the price of the apartments went up and renting changed and the whole demographic changed. So it's been a really nice change in demographic. Like, you have your stalwart alternative crew that come in all the time, and you have lovely regulars. Like people are still discovering us after being on the street for 6.5 years, and they live 1 block away. And then we get people who walk in from London and they know exactly how to get here. And they've heard about it in London or they've heard about it in New York, and they just walk straight in and they kind of know what to expect. And I think what's really nice about the street is that there's so many kind of like little, singular owned businesses where people are invested in the outcome of the businesses, where like, say, I'll use Sydney as an example. Sydney's a lot more kind of corporate and, and the structure of it's way different, but definitely Melbourne in this area and then Brunswick Street is a lot of, unique individually owned and operated or personally owned and operated bars and restaurants. Yeah, but then there's other things that have fallen by the way, and that's heartbreaking, And you come onto the street and people didn't believe in you, and now you're still here, and other people have gone, and that's the tough thing about the ecosystem of these businesses as well. Yeah. Like you could be hot for 5 minutes and then you're not hot anymore. There's so many things that have popped up and gone. Even in our time. Yeah. But I mean, at the moment, regardless of the interview, there's like 7 bars that have closed. Wow. Yeah, because it's just so tough. Like you're not fighting over a limited amount of people. You're just fighting over a limited amount of spending power from those people. And then they make choices that are more probably lighthearted. And the demographic change when I first got in here was like, it was emo as, and then you just have to roll with the punches. Whoever's going to come in, like there'd be amazing nights where you open up at 5. We used to open at 5 and close at 1. You would open at 5 and it would just be all blokes. And I don't know how that happened, but that's very intimidating for other people. And then other nights it would be a complete change around, and it would just be women, and then it would be like baristas and then cocktail people. And it has this really nice shifty mechanic where you're not dealing with the same people over and over again, because little bars that have exclusivity tend to generate the same type of people, like that exclusive members club type of mentality. And what's really nice about this bar is I hope it doesn't have it. It doesn't seem to have it. Like we get regulars who come on once a week and then twice a month, or and so it's ever changing. You get to interact with so many different people.
So I mean, yeah. So what were the sorts of things that you thought, this is what it's going to be? It's in my mind, and then all of a sudden you went, oh, okay, you had to. So were there some good things that you've learned?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think you can be anchored to an idea, right? That's a really important thing, because you have to have some type of integrity to that idea, and you have to, like push it along, but you also have to be compromising at some level to your idea. And I always try to tell people, like when I first opened the bar, it was like, well, it's not even when I first opened. There are a multitude of people involved in the outcome of your bar, like business partners, designers, architects, and each one of them, and partners, relationships with friends, and all those types of things. And each one of them has not a say in it, but they shape the way that your ideas move forward. And I think, I was very open to having a bar, and I wanted it to look a lot like this. I don't think this is how I imagined it. you know, because imagination is pretty tough. We're close to the original sketch outs and, you know, the Excel spreadsheet that I put together with all the kind of like imagery and the mood boards. But then, you know, maybe your builder comes in and goes, oh, this would be really cool. And then you've got a new thing that's come onto your bar and it's changed the way that you interact with it. And then I think just time you become a little bit more relaxed. Like you're very protective. Like I was very defensive about the bar. Like you have to be, because, you know, this is your spot. You're going to be here for a long time and, you know, you have to curate it. And you're like, if you're unhappy with it in 5 years' time, you just can't sell it. So that's not how this industry works. And so I was very defensive and I was very kind of like, no, I'm going to go this way. And that's contrary to what most people thought we should do. And you know, that's really tough. And that's tough with your business partners, that you take an immense stance and you become very stubborn about where you're going to end up. But I hope I've been compromising enough to make the changes that are necessary when you're in a little bit of problem or trouble, not problems, but when a little bit of trouble comes along, or, you know, you want to do something and articulate it in an art form, like making drinks and with flavors that people haven't tasted before. And some people are like, they love it, and then other people hate on it. And, you know, you can't do anything to control that. But if you listen to people all the time, you're going to end up with a very diluted product. Diluted product. And I think what happens is that a lot of people aren't strong enough to withstand that first barrage of, you should do this. They see you as not being busy. You know, you should have more people. You should do PR. I'll do your, you know, like I'll do your Instagram and all those types of things. And I think I really just wanted to focus on the bar and make sure that was really solid. And then, you know, certain things that we've taken on post-lockdown, we were bombarded with like an hour and a half, 2 hour queue. Like that's a really tough thing to manage when you're not a queue management person. Yeah, and you never expected that. Like, you know, the opening joke is I wanted people in the bar, and now you've got an overflow of people, and how do you manage that? And I don't think the bartending part like teaches you how to, it teaches you how to look after people, but it doesn't teach you how to negotiate on a door in a way that maintains like a friendliness and orderliness. There's always a good cop and a bad cop at the door. Someone will be like, hey, how long is it going to be? And then the next person will interfere and like, oh, how come you can't let us in? And it's like, because we've got a limited amount of space, you know, and we want to make sure that the service is equally as important as the drinks, and the, you know, like our interaction is equally as important, you know. And so those were challenging factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you were open during lockdown?
Yeah, so lockdown was a really, really complicated process.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because there were so many positive things that came out of my life in lockdown, but the business wasn't one of them. And you get to a point where you look at it and you go, oh, that was a long 2 years. It was a long 2 years where it changed the living dynamic of a lot of people. It changed the lifestyle, the way of thinking for a lot of people. It removed a crazy amount of amazing talent out of our industry. And then, you know, obviously people who couldn't afford to stay in Australia had to go home, and that was really tough. And that was a conversation because at the time I'm a New Zealander, and we were talking about me going home, you know, taking my family back to New Zealand because there was just no money involved. And, you know, like, how could you live if you don't have any money? And then subsidies came through with the Labor government, and we kind of got back on our feet. I kept all my employees, so I think I had 3, Rob, Jesse, myself, and then Hayden came back on board, and Andy Chu came on board. And like, so we managed to go through lockdown, minimum amount of problem. We did takeaway cocktails like every other business in Melbourne, every other business in Australia. That was drying up relatively quick towards the end of lockdown. Like people had their fill. And I mean, when they had their fill, they had their fill. They were drinking martinis in the shower and like doing all the things that you shouldn't do when you drink alcohol, like, you know. And so I think people started feeling like they were getting out of it. And then there was a little bit of a hurrah for a year, like a year after lockdown, it was a pretty massive year. Like we didn't stop. And I can't remember not thinking about, it was like every day was a Friday. Monday was a Friday, Saturday was a Friday, every day was a Friday, and it didn't matter. We still had some restrictions, so we still had a limited amount of space. So we could only have like eight customers at any one sitting. And so that was relatively difficult to manage. People were getting frustrated at the door, you know, like obviously vaccine checks and all those types of QR code login. Everyone went through roughly the same problem for a little while. But we managed to come through it. I think it's changed the ecosystem of the bar community around the world, and each one of us has been affected differently. And I think there's not many places in the world that weren't affected, but we've all gone through something together. Like, you know, like it was the only thing in history that probably Generation X and a few of the other generations all gone through together, you know, where our grandparents, great-grandparents went through, you know, life and world-changing events together. So they have a kind of collective memory and idea. But we came out okay. You know, I'm still here. I'm talking to you guys.
Still here.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the past. What is the future for you guys?
The future? Well, I think it's just make sure that the above board stays operationally functional and it makes money, and, you know, we keep a really good team. And, you know, the greater thing about coming out of lockdown was the focus on culture and, you know, the way that we interact and the way that the staff interact and how important it is for sick days and being able just to communicate that, where every other business is like you calling sick and everyone has a heart attack, you know, because you're such a necessary part of the team. And, you know, I think for us, it's from strength to strength. You know, like above board's gone through 7.5 years of changes from just me working it on a Friday and Saturday to now that there's 5 staff and probably with a need for 6 staff. And I've been able to expand and take on other opportunities. And I think that's a really big thing. And I think maybe when I first started, I didn't dream big enough for this bar. You know, and maybe there was a self-conscious thing that I had, you know, like I just want to be successful with 16 people. And I never dreamt the way that I should have. I should have gone, man, a bubble is going to kill it with 16 people. What else is it's going to do? What else is it going to do? And I think that's a fun prospect, is, you know, having kind of maybe some breathing room to dream a bit bigger.
And
So 18-seater cocktail bar next.
yeah.
Just increase it by 2. Yeah.
Each
You know,
year.
keep it as minimalist. Just make it three drinks. Old-fashioned martini and Negroni.
I didn't ask you the name above board, did I? Where did I?
No. So basically, it just comes from the fact that we were talking about how we pay rent from below. So, like, you know, we pay board and rent for downstairs, and they're included in the ecosystem of the bar. And then the other thing, it was always about open and honest hospitality. You know, you get to the point where people are like, oh, have a nice day. And I really wanted to get away from that. And I really wanted to get away from the standard kind of like descriptive interaction. Hi, welcome. And you've got the script. And I really wanted to be personable with it, and that can go wrong so quickly. You know, like, I'm a cheeky guy. It can go wrong amazingly, and not intentionally. You know, like maybe you say something, I jam up for some dumb reason, and then, you know, I want to be able to talk to people. So it was always about open and honest hospitality. And I think, you know, my wife came up with it, Erin, and just said, why don't you call it Above Board? And it's a stroke of genius, because A is the best name on any list ever. You're the first up on every list. And, you know, Above Board is really nice, and, you know, it has a nice ring to it. The way that it looks as a logo is really nice as well. You know, it has symmetry. The bar has symmetry. Yeah.
Okay. And Melbourne in general, have you got anything to say about if somebody wants to come here?
Oh, you just come. Melbourne's cool. Melbourne's really cool. I think Melbourne is underrated on the kind of the international scale. That's probably not the right word, but on the international scene, it's very underrated, and we forget that it's huge. Australia is huge. And, you know, like 3 or 4 days in Melbourne, you can cover some really amazing bars, and you're going to go line them up. You're going to go Birdie, Caretakers. I hope you got 1 or 2 on there as well. Have you got 1 or 2? And then you got Bar Bellamy, and go check those guys out. And Melbourne's got this nice little pop-up scene post-lockdown where a few people have owned bars, and, you know, leases have become more accessible. And I think the hospitality dynamic will change, and that's really amazing. And then even Sydney has so much to offer. So I think Australia and just the generality has a huge amount to offer. And then I think Melbourne is one of the coolest cities in the world. And what's cool about it is compact as well. You know, when you get bored, you can jump out of this area and it's a 15-minute hike down to the next area. And, you know, we're all coming out of lockdown, supporting each other a lot more than we did when we first went into lockdown, you know. And I think a few more bars open up, and maybe we get access to a little cheaper technology here and there, and you'll see a very different kind of like bar community and bar style, which would be fun. And, you know, what's cool about owning a bar like this is hopefully it inspires younger bartenders, regardless of where they come from, that you can do something cool with 16 seats. You know, it doesn't have to be a 50-seater bar restaurant. It can be 16 seats, and you can be highly successful, and how you determine what your success is up to you, you know.
I think That's really nice.
That's good, you know?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanna?
Nah,
you wanna put on?
Scorpio. I don't know.
Me too.
No, yeah, but you know, like those things are really like people forget that it's not just about selling things; it's about inspiring people. And
Yeah.
there's so many people at the moment that look like they're used car salesmen all the time, you know. And they're like, buy from me, and it's like, hey, by the way, you know, why don't you just come and chill?
Yeah.
You know, and what's really cool about a space like this is it removes people's kind of idea or perception about what they have to have, you know, and people still want certain things. So some of the most conflicting stuff is like, I currently don't carry any vodka, mint, chartreuse, pretty much everything I got bored of in 2012, because I was in the Merchant Hotel in Belfast. And then I came out to Bar Americano in Melbourne. And then, you know, I became very much, this is how I want to see my bar move forward. And, you know, they're the conflicting things is when you don't have like the comfort drink that someone wants, then it becomes, you know, a little bit irritable,
Yeah.
you know. But other than that, it's cool. I love this bar.
One thing I will ask you actually
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, if somebody does come here, is there a cocktail that you think that they should?
Look, the signatures on our menu are cool. We have HSL Special, which is like blackberry Amaro sour with a dash of absinthe. The Bright Side, which is fresh and light yuzu, lychee, sour. It's delicious. And then we have a beautiful kind of like espresso martini meets Irish coffee variation called the Back Burner. And that has a little bit of passion fruit, Amaro Lucano, and Australian product called Mr. Black with a like Chantilly cream float. That's delectable.